Okay, I think we'll get started here then. So hello, everybody. Welcome. Thank you for joining us today for our webinar on the IEC effective participation in the IEC today. I know we have the IEC general meeting coming up in just a few short weeks. I hope to see many of you there, and we think this webinar will be a really great opportunity to kind of review different strategies and best practices for participating in the IEC and help you feel a little bit more confident getting into your meetings in the coming weeks, and even outside of the general meeting if you're not attending that. So before we move on to the next slide, I just wanted to note that we are recording this, this webinar. So just note that, and we'll get started. Catherine, if you want to go to the next slide, please. So before I hand it over to our speakers today, I just wanted to give you a little review of the agenda for today, our learning objectives, and a few other quick housekeeping items. Hopefully you've all had a chance to review the USNC constituency training modules. If you haven't, we encourage you to review these 6 modules ahead of the IEC general meeting or any of your next meetings that you have for the IEC. You can find all of these modules and other resources on the USNC Education and Training webpage. It is linked here on this page. We will circulate this slide deck to everybody who is registered for today's webinar. So you'll have this as a resource. We'll also circulate the recording of today's webinar as well. So you'll have both pieces there, but you'll be able to access those live links once we circulate this document to you all too. But you can also hop on the ANSI website, ansi.org, and go to the USNC page there. You'll find a ton of resources, including these. We did just revamp our education and training webpage, so there's a lot of new resources there for you if you'd like to peruse those. Next page, please. All right, so as you can see, today's agenda will cover a brief history of the USNC and IEC, how to prepare for the IEC meetings, best practices during IEC meeting, and responsibilities following these meetings. We'll also cover consensus, technical positions, and USNC voting process, as well as hosting meetings here in the US. At the end, we'll leave time for questions and answers. We'll also pause after each one of these sections to answer any questions that come up. That way you don't have to hold your questions for the whole 2 hours here. If you have any questions, though, please do just enter them in the chat. Staff will be monitoring those, any questions that come in through the chat. So if you want to enter them there, we'll call on people at the end of every section to answer questions. Okay. So next slide. Thank you. We hope by the end of today's webinar that you'll leave with an understanding of the importance of global cooperation and collaboration, a stronger understanding of the value of participation in the USNC and IEC, concrete steps for cultivating international relationships, especially confidence in participating in the IEC meetings, and also organizational relationships. For those of you, if you want to go to the next slide, who are new to standards and conformity assessment, I just wanted to highlight this really great opportunity that we have at the USNC. We have this committee called the Young and Emerging Professionals Committee. It's a group that is made up of emerging professionals, so we consider that to be anyone with 8 years or less of related experience in standards or conformity assessment. And this group offers a lot of great opportunities to engage with the USNC and IEC throughout the year. It's a great way to learn about it, to kind of dip your toes into the standards and conformity assessment world, or dip them in a little deeper. So we recommend that anybody who's interested in getting involved a bit more, reach out to my colleague, Mac Connors. Her contact information is down there on the screen. And then speaking of my colleagues, we've got the ANSI, the USNC team here. Feel free to reach out to us at any point. Our contact information is here. We're always happy to help. So feel free to give us an email or reach out to anyone at any point. And speaking of my colleagues, I just wanted to give a little shout out to my colleague Catherine, who's on the line here. She worked very closely with the presenters today and helped update our training materials to make this webinar happen. So thank you for that. Right, next slide. I think we're going to get to our main, presenters today. So I am just so thrilled. I feel like we are so lucky to have the presenters that we have on the call today. The amount of experience that we have just with these three individuals is just tremendous. And I know that everybody, including myself, will learn a lot on the call today. So thank you to our speakers for taking the time to join us today and to share your knowledge and real life experiences with us. It's very helpful to hear about your experience and share your guys' best practices. So thank you again. I will do a brief introduction of them and then I'll pass it on to our first presenter. So the presenters today are just listed in order of their presentation. So Wally will be our first presenter today. Wally Zoller is a member of the, waving there, is a member of the USNC Technical Management Committee and the USNC Communications Committee. He's also a part of the Rules and Procedures Committee and YEP Committee. Wally is a member of the TAG for USNC IEC on Systems Committee on Smart Manufacturing. He's also a member of the USNC TAG to ICTC 65, which I think is Industrial Process Measurement, Control and Automation, and then also SC 65B on Measurements and Control Devices. And Wally is himself a former IEC YP, so we're happy to have him on the call. Right? All right, our next presenter, we have Ali. Happy to have Ali. Ali, this is actually, he's joining us again. I think Wally has also presented for us on this webinar before, so we have lots of experience here. But Ali is a member of the USNC TMC as well, and on the Communications Committee. He's an expert on the JSEG 15 and Metaverse and Systems Committee on Bio-Digital Convergence. Ali also is very engaged with ANSI. More broadly, he is the chair of the ANSI Committee on Education, so we're pleased to have him here with us today. And then our third speaker, we have Valara Davis. She is our OSD guru. I can't remember the term that we came up with the other day, but we're so happy to have Valara join us always, but especially on this webinar today. Valara is a member of the TMC as well. She's actually a chair of one of the subcommittees of the TMC. It's called SCOOP, the Subcommittee on Operating Procedures. She's a member of the USNC Rules and Procedures Committee, and then is a USNC TAG member to IEC SC 22E, and then IEC TC 108. She also has IEC membership. She's the secretary for the IEC TC 108 and assistant secretary for TC 61. So thank you again to all of our presenters. And I know we are short on time, or I know we have a lot to pack in our 2 hours today. So I will hand it right over to Wally.
Okay, thank you very much, Megan. And I will also say, I'll steal a couple of those minutes to say I'm humbled to be here with Ali and Valara, both of whom I've worked with for many years. And I am by far the least experienced among the three of us. And they are, I'm happy to be here among such esteemed experts. So thank you very much. And I'll start my presentation and try to stay on time. So the purpose of the IEC, which was founded in 1906, is to promote international cooperation. And the word cooperation is going to meld into the word consensus as we go along here, right? On all questions and activities related to standards in electricity, electronics, and electrotechnical activities. They are so very closely linked with ISO, who kind of took over for everything else not covered by the IEC, and the ITU, which covers telecommunications and radio communications. Here at the USNC to the IEC, we're focused mainly on those activities. So we'll be looking at that and the structure of the IEC and the USNC that supports it. And I'll just drop in a cool fact that when I officially joined the IEC, my partner gave me a very cool book authored by Lord Kelvin, who was the first, I believe, the first president of the IEC. I could be wrong on that. Someone can correct me on the chat. But it goes very well back and it is very well established by a large community of experts. So next slide, please. This diagram represents the top of the structure of the IEC. So the IEC board being in the middle, which supports the General Assembly. Contained within the General Assembly are the national committees, which represent their countries in the IEC. The IEC board also provides oversight to the SMB, the Standards Management Board, the Market Strategy Board, and the Conformity Assessment Board, each of which have structures beneath them, which we'll explore as we move forward, and especially with respect to the Conformity Assessment Board. I believe we have a slide later that explains what each of these bodies beneath them are. The mission and values of the IEC is to achieve worldwide use of these standards. And the worldwide use of these standards is critical to ensuring that there is safety, efficiency, and reliability and interoperability of this electronic equipment, while also allowing companies to create differentiation within their products. But first and foremost are these ideas of safety, efficiency, and reliability, so that we can all buy these products, whether it's the charger for our phone, all the way up to industrial equipment, and ensure ourselves that we're working and operating in a safe environment. The working in the IEC requires you to embrace some virtues, which is what I'll call is at the bottom of the slide here. And the first, that you're trustworthy, meaning you are bringing your best experience to the table, and that you are working in good faith. That we're inclusive to not only countries, but companies, consortia, anyone who is going to bring good faith and constructive effort to the work that we're doing. That it's independent, that it's not for profit. It is not a pay-for-play opportunity. It is not whoever pays the most gets the most influence. It is one country, one vote, and we work through that consensus, which can take multiple stages and can be challenging, but in the end results in these virtues that we're talking about. And then finally, that we're progressive and constantly adapting to the evolving societal needs as they come up. The world has changed significantly since 1906, and the IEC has adapted with them as we move forward. Next slide, if you don't mind. So why should one participate? The first, again, is to facilitate the adoption of these international standards or technical reports or other products that the IEC is able to produce. Your ability to participate in them is both critical to your work, whether you're a consultant, whether you work for a company, or whether you work for a consortia, but to make sure that you're part of that process. Gaining access to that process also provides access to the markets as they come up, because as the markets adopt those standards and say that, all right, if you meet this standard, you have access to the market, you eliminate both cost and procedure that can cause downtime, that can cause reduction of sales, that can cause reduction of import and export, and to also safeguard the environment. Additionally, you create unique network opportunities, and I think that will come up in as Valara and Ali speak as well. As a former young professional, I can tell you that the networking opportunities are invaluable. Not only are you working with your competitors, you're working with people from other countries who provide perspectives that you would have never considered had you not been given the opportunity to participate in these fields. And then to get early warning to emerging standards and the pressures of both the market and the producers as, technology evolves. New technology, sort of creeps up on us sometimes, and the ability of the IEC to provide a forum to address those new technologies and make sure we're operating safely and securely inside those new technologies before they get to the consumers is critically important. So the USNC is the body through which we are able to do that. So they represent the United States in the IEC, and then in the development of the globally relevant standards for the electrotechnical industry. By participating through the USNC, you are able to participate in tags at the national level. You're able to participate at the international level, and then you're also able to work your way into the governance of the IEC itself. And I think later we'll introduce a slide of some of those super relevant and super influential people who have spent a lot of time throughout their career demonstrating their both their competencies and their trustworthiness in order to participate at that level. It also serves as a conduit. Thank you for going back for the standard setting community, and is administrated by ANSI. Excuse me, our good friends there who administrate our activities. So now next slide, please. So this is a brief organizational structure of the USNC. It slightly mirrors what happens at the IEC in order to make sure that we're participating and making commentary where necessary. So at USNC ANSI membership, that's your entree into participation. The board of directors advises on legal matters, on technical matters, on participatory matters as well, and advises the International Policy Advisory Group, the Council, and the Secretariat, who oversee our standing committees, our technical committees, and our conformity assessment committees as well. The standing committees will seem very functional, right? So, finance, nomination, communications, these are the governance committees that make sure that the USNC continues to function properly, is open, value adding, and create succession planning, especially down at the young and emerging professionals level. The technical management committee makes sure that our US tags, our virtual tags, and that our IEC administered secretariats, of which I am one, are operating properly within the directives. And if there are any issues outstanding, that they have an escalation path in order to make sure that they're operating both correctly and within the directives to bring the most value. And then, of course, the conformity assessment areas, which again we will visit again, but the Conformity Assessment Policy Coordination Committee helps us to leverage those standards to make sure that we have the ability to get into these markets and to represent that we're meeting the standards that we're taking part in developing. Next slide, please. So here you'll see a list of our USNC officers. Veronica is our current president at the USNC. I shouldn't be so familiar with her, but Ms. Lancaster has been with us for some time. She's currently leading us. Ade is our USNC General Secretary, coming on just recently. Joan Sterling, Peter Pandillo, Cho, and Kevin Lippert are our vice presidents and immediate past presidents of the various groups within the USNC, and our critical stakeholders within the IEC, so at the international level, is Steve Margus, who's our IEC Vice Chair of Conformity Assessment, Sonia Bird, who is our Business Advisory Committee member, Peter Pandillo, who is our Governance Review and Audit Committee Chair, Megan Hayes is our Diversity Advisory Committee Chair, and Robert Sloan is our very recently elected IEC MSB member, and congratulations to him as he comes on into that role. So the USNC interfaces with, and this is where we start to get into a little bit of our acronyms, but the technical committees, the subcommittees, the joint technical committees, and the systems committees versus via the mirror committees that exist within the USNC structure. There is one USNC tag for each of those, the technical committees, the subcommittees, and the systems committees, and for the joint technical committees where the USNC is a participating member. The other option, of course, is an observing member, and there we would have less influence, but similar visibility. The USNC administers over 170 of these tags through a variety of administrators, all of whom we tip our caps to and owe a great debt of gratitude for their generous work. The US tags determine and consolidate the votes and comments for each of the IEC documents. It is one country, one vote, but all of our input is valuable and is considered. The USNC also designates the delegates to attend the various meetings. Officers, of course, are obligated to attend these meetings, but as delegates of the United States represent the USNC and are required to register as such, and then they represent the USNC in these meetings. The USNC also appoints experts based on their competencies and their willingness to participate in these groups, whether they're working groups, maintenance teams, project teams, and the various other structures that exist within the IEC, some of which are a little bit more esoteric, but this is the basic structure that allows you to participate in these groups. And it also helps or allows us to submit proposals for new work items. I believe for those embedded, we still use the term NP, but these new work proposals are done not by individuals, not by companies, but by the USNC itself and the administration thereof. So consensus is the term we really want to talk about. And this is where I started in the beginning and said, you know, everything kind of comes down to this terminology. And it is important to note that consensus does not imply unanimity. It does not mean that everybody agrees on everything, but it does mean that we have gotten to a point where we can all agree on the substantial issues being acceptable by the parties concerned, and that any concerns or conflicts can be reconciled down the path or by amendments later on. But consensus is really a more complicated topic than people, I think, tend to accept. It doesn't just mean outvoting your foes. It means coming to general agreement, which sometimes means compromising your position in an effort to make sure that standards are developed properly, safely, and efficiently. And it requires a gentle touch, and that's where some of this training is going to come in and help you to work with your coworkers, whether they are in your company, in your consortia, in your country, or not, and to reach a consensus to move these projects forward. So the steps of those project development after being introduced as a new project is or in preparation and then being delivered as a project is to first research, you know, what is important to the industry writ large, what is going to provide a platform upon which we can build more projects, more content, but also that the industry is looking for and that is valuable to others. You have to gather the viewpoints of interested parties and, in fact, make sure that there are such parties to participate in your activities, lest you work in a vacuum, which is not recommended, right? You want to work with the input and with the assistance of all desirable parties. Discussion can sometimes be challenging, or in some cases even include disagreement, but those disagreements lead to compromise and ultimate consensus. And the agreement on the content, whether that's editorial or normative, meaning that it actually impacts the substance of the process or the standard, is important for everyone to come to agreement on. Again, it is rare that you get 100% agreement and that you will never, you won't see any comment or or any dissent, but it's important to understand and include everybody's perspective when working on these. From there, you prepare the drafts, agreement on the drafts moving forward, and any amendments, changes, or addendums that are added going forward. And then finally, publication, which I can tell you is a very satisfying step of project development. I still shudder a little every time I get a piece of mail from the IEC that is a standard that I have participated in drafting or guiding the project development of, because I realize how much effort it was put in by so many people to reach a consensus to make sure that the small part of the global economy that I am a part of is operating safely and securely. And so it is a very satisfying process, and I encourage everyone to take the opportunity to participate in this way. Sometimes there are small deviations. The in some countries clause is part of the directives in the IEC, and it allows a statement of compliance within the standard that requires compliance with normative elements, meaning the substantive elements that are not standard. So not the informative elements. The statement is provided by the IEC National Committee to be included in an IS. It is specific to countries as they exist. There are two cases that are distinguished: the conditions of a permanent nature, such as voltages, frequencies, and climate, or different practices of a less permanent nature. So you will see these pop up. They are sometimes a necessity in order to make sure that standards and projects move forward without losing the good work of the people working in good faith to push these standards forward, but recognizing that there are going to be some differentiation in countries. And I believe there's one more slide, which takes us to the final point of submission for the text, which is the committee draft for vote, or the CDV. That submission does not require the approval of the technical committee, subcommittee, or systems committee, its chair or its secretary. The national committee has the final say as to where to place that in the clause, because it will directly impact their country. And then every effort should be made to find solutions that would make those statements unnecessary. They sometimes, again, they are necessary to get these standards across the finish line, and that's why their inclusion is sometimes necessitated. But it is not seen as a reason for a negative vote by other national committees. It is seen as a concession to the realities that exist, the pragmatic realities that exist within other countries that allow these standards to still be published and still be accepted as a document in those areas. So I think that we have put the link to the In Some Countries guidance document that can require some nuance, and I'm sure any of us would be able to or willing to go over it with anyone who has questions about those moving forward. So thank you very much. Oh, no, there is another slide, and these are the conformity assessment bodies that I referenced earlier. So we've got the electrical equipment conformity assessment body, the quality assessment body, the conformity assessment body for certification in explosive atmospheres, EX, and then of course the renewable energy applications. And these are all part of the very important conformity assessment arm of the IEC and the USNC, which participates within them, which allows us to leverage our standards to meet these conformity assessment or these conformity schemes and bring products to market. So are there any questions at this point? I know I spoke a little bit quickly, trying to stay on time and allow Ali and Valara their space as well. If not, you can always put your questions in the chat and I can answer them, or we can answer them later on in the presentation.
Not seeing any questions in the chat here. I do see one person with their hand raised. George, I don't know if you want to submit your question in the chat or if you want to quickly ask a question here before we move on. Okay. Oh, Oh, my hand is up. I think we can move on. If we get the question in the chat, we can come back to it. But thank you, Wally. We can move on before the meeting.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, Megan. Thank you, Wally. So hi, everyone. I'm glad to be here with you presenting once again on this very important topic of how to be effective in participation in our IEC meetings. So before the meeting is the time where you actually are preparing for the meeting and getting your documents together, establishing your US positions, getting your delegations appointed in order to be best prepared and represent US in these IEC meetings. So if we can move on to the next slide, please. So the very first step, as Wally was mentioning, the way we participate in IEC is one vote, one country, right? So at the IEC level, it's the US is just one vote. So the very first thing we need to do before attending a plenary meeting is to appoint a US delegation, right? And that is the job of your technical advisory group, which is essentially a mirror committee to the IEC technical committee or the subcommittee that they are representing. And the USNC tag is the one that appoints the delegation to the plenary meeting, and they do that before each meeting. The purpose to appoint a U.S. delegation is to ensure that our we can speak with one voice and to ensure that our views and positions are represented internationally via our delegation, right? So if we move on to the next slide, please. In some cases, there might be one delegate, and that delegate might also serve as a head of delegation. And in other cases, there might be multiple delegates. And the delegates are really the ones that are the official representatives of the USNC Technical Advisory Group or the Mirror Committee, as I mentioned earlier, to that IEC committee that they are representing. There may be some cases where observers may be allowed on a case-by-case basis, but please note that observers may be part of the US delegations, but are not allowed to speak during the meeting. It's the official representatives are the US delegates, and within the delegates, there is usually a head of delegation, which we call HOD, that are appointed to speak for the entire US delegation, and the head of delegate may appoint other delegates as speakers on selective topics as they come up or as they determine that that delegate may be best suited to speak up on that topic. So the official spokesperson is, however, the head of delegation. Another important thing that the head of delegation does is determine whether US is going to participate on the drafting committee. The drafting committee is the committee that keeps track of all the decisions and the action items that the meetings has, and come up with the resolutions document at the end of the meeting for approval and review by the committee. This drafting committee has representation from the folks that volunteers, and the head of delegation determined whether US is going to participate, and if so, who the delegate is going to be from the US that's going to participate and that in that drafting committee of the resolutions. So if we move on to the next slide, please. Yes, thank you. So the experts, as I think Wally already touched on this a little bit, that while we go in as delegates of the US to these plenary meetings, when we are representing when we are participating in IEC working groups, project teams, or maintenance team, we are actually represented as US experts, and they are, of course, appointed based on their professional expertise and not representing the viewpoints of the US Technical Advisory Group, or the Mirror Committee, as I call it. And of course, as part of being a US experts, these participants, these experts are required to keep the entire tag informed of any developments within the working group or the groups that they are participating in, while of course not representing the US viewpoints while participating internationally. They can still update the tag and get their viewpoints within their to help inform their work within the international group. So if you move on to the next slide, this is where we're going to touch a little bit upon, what are you required to do as an effective delegate or an expert? So as an expert, as we were just talking about in these working groups, project team and maintenance team, as an expert, you are appointed to demonstrate competence in the field that the committee is working or the writing the standard on. So you have to be active. You have to make sure that you provide input early. You have to make sure that you review drafts as they come on time. You have to keep track of the due dates. You have to make sure that you follow the standards development process. Make sure that you participate in meetings when you have registered to participate, as well as just as the nature of these standards development, many of the decisions are actually facilitated via discussions with colleagues from other countries that are also participating along with you. And that also helps to drive consensus, as Wally touched on earlier, that, Wally also pointed out that it's not a unanimous agreement, right? So there are things that you may have to discuss with other experts. You have to get agreement on, you have to get your viewpoint across, and that may not be possible to do within the time allotted during the meeting. So one of the important things that you do, that you review the agenda items before the meeting, and you try to point out, flag the agenda items where you have to collaborate and coordinate with other experts and ensure that you get your viewpoints across. So to effectively explain your position on the agenda item. And that helps to represent the US viewpoints clearly, concisely, and in a persuasive manner. So, attending those social gatherings and informal events are also as much important as attending the formal meetings. If you can move on to the next slide, please. So how do you actually get these documents? There are two ways to get documents. Of course, when you're participating as an expert to those working group meetings, you will have access to what we call it IEC collaboration platform. And IEC collaboration platform will have, it's kind of like a project management tool to help you get access to documents, any documents that are being circulated out within the committee itself, right? So this could be, and in most cases, these are the unofficial documents, right? So these are the working drafts. These are sometimes, the testing reports, sometimes articles, sometimes reports from other committees. These are all the documents that helps you as an expert to make decisions on what goes into the standard and how to structure the working draft of the standard, right? So these are all accessible to you via the IEC collaboration platform if you are registered as an expert on the working group or the project team or the maintenance team. And then the official documents are the ones that are actually posted onto the IEC platform itself. And these are accessible through the IEC website. This will, of course, they're also, if you have already participating in IEC activities, you notice that they go by the stage codes and, NP, DC, CD, each one of them have meaning associated with it, where, for example, NP means new proposal, DC for document for comment, CD for, committee draft, and so on, right? So each one of them have a meaning that helps you to translate what that document is about and what action you need to take in response to that document. But these are the official documents that gets posted by the secretary of the IEC committee that has ownership of it, right? So usually these official documents get posted by the secretary, and then they get circulated by the USNC TAC secretary and the officers of the USNC TAC itself. So if we can move on to the next slide, please. So how do you actually prepare for an IEC meeting? I'm going to touch on the meeting guidance link later on in my slides, but let's talk about, what do you need to do to actually prepare for an IEC meeting? So in order to prepare for an IEC meeting, the USNC within your tag itself has the USNC has appointed technical advisors, the tag secretaries, and in some cases deputy technical advisors as well. And these technical advisors working with the tag secretary call a tag meeting in most cases to review the U.S. positions on the agenda items that have been posted by the international IEC secretary of that committee, and they develop U.S. positions on each of the item before the meeting. So there might be one meeting or multiple meetings leading up to that international meeting in order to determine U.S. position. But before you go into these tag meetings, you as a tag member should research each of these agenda items, determine your organization view and your position that you will be taking to develop, and then a consensus will be reached within the USNC tag to essentially establish the US position on that agenda item. When you go into these meetings, in order to make sure that your position gets heard and your position gets accepted, it's always best to have data, any other relevant information and documentation that is available to support your viewpoints and positions if one is needed, right? In some cases, it may not be needed, but in some cases, it's best to have the data points available to ensure that your position gets accepted by the tag itself to help get consensus. You also have to make sure that you keep up to date with the status of issues within the committee. So, the tag, of course, keeps track of it within the tag itself by agendas and the meeting minutes. And in some cases, I have seen some tags keep an action item tracker. In some cases, they also translate the agenda of the international committee meeting to what the actions or the decisions has been made by the tag itself. So it depends on the tag that you're participating in and the operating procedures of those tags. But in most cases, there is a mechanism for you to keep up to date on status of all the agenda items that are being discussed, what the U.S. position is on each of the agenda items, and ensure that you have a chance to contribute your position in helping to get consensus on the U.S. position itself. So if you move on to the next slide. We also, as tag members, should make sure that the USNC tag considers taking on leadership positions where appropriate within the international committee. We are proactive in nominating experts when we have to. We of course have to make sure that, especially the U.S. delegates that are going into the meeting, that you know the ISO IEC directives. Especially the IEC supplement itself, which outlines the IEC specific rules and procedures, as well as the related USNC procedures, which in most cases you are following the USNC tag operating procedures, but in some cases you are also following the unique operating procedures determined by the tag itself. So make sure that you are familiar with both the US version as well as the international version and the guidelines for voting. Learn as much as possible before the meeting about the delegates that will be attending the meeting. That will help you to establish your plan for collaborating and coordinating on relevant agenda items, where you will have to ensure that your position gets heard. If in case you would like to change the position of the other national committee, or if you need their support, then you have to take time to get to know those delegates and reach out to those delegates again during those coffee breaks, during those social events, so you can have effective decision making during the meeting, right? So and we will touch upon all of these best practices during the meeting when we talk about that. So another important aspect of before the meeting is arriving at the international, if you are serving as a US delegation, then arriving at the meeting location a day or two earlier to get to know the location itself, the meeting, the meeting location. It's how to get to the meeting location, get to know delegates. You know, you may want to schedule even a lunch or a dinner with US delegation itself, or if you want to if you want to do outreach to other delegates before the meeting, then this is also the best time to do that, because in most cases, many of the delegations do arrive a day or two earlier at the meeting site. You also have to make sure that you learn the protocol of exchanging business cards and reaching out to them, as this is a global meeting. You have people from all over the world within these IEC committees, and each country has its own way, which is which is something that you learn as you get to meet people, get to know them. And learn as much as possible about the culture of the country that you're visiting, which is of course always also exciting to learn as you get to visit these countries during your meetings, as well as it's always helpful to know a bit of the language to get around in cases of if you have to if you have an emergency, or if you have to communicate to the locals. It's always just helpful to learn a bit of the local language as well. So if you move on to the next slide, please. So how do you really prepare to attend virtual meetings during in-person meetings or hybrid meetings? And this is very common, of course, since COVID. We have been meeting virtually, and many of the times you may not have any choice but to participate virtually. So in those cases, there are rules and regulations that are outlined in the meeting participation guide that ISO and IEC has published, that the link is posted in the slide deck itself, and I'll touch upon that later on in my slide as well. But some of the best practices that I can point out while I'm going through these slides: virtual participation during in-person meetings or hybrid meeting is at the discretion of the chair or the secretary. And when I say chair or secretary, this is at the IEC level, right? The IEC technical committee chair or secretary. And if no virtual participation is proposed for an upcoming IEC or in-person meeting, then you can always ask if virtual access is possible. If you move on to the next slide, please. For hybrid meeting, USNC tag members should request that the chair set up, now when we talk about the chair, we are talking about the USNC tag members within the tag itself that request that the chair set up rules of engagement if none exist, maintain online awareness, and to designate someone to monitor for questions and comments from virtual participants, defines and these rules will help to define and ensure that there is adequate participation from all that are participating in the meeting virtually. And for exclusive virtual meetings, we also have to make sure that the meetings are not 8 to 9 hours, continuously. They have to be a reasonable amount of time where participants can participate effectively. In most cases, for working groups, we do recommend that the maximum meeting length to be about 3 hours, and of course ensuring that you are providing enough breaks, for USNC tag members themselves, they have to make sure that you set up a separate communication channel to communicate among your colleagues, among delegates itself, among the USNC TAG members behind the scenes to ensure coordination on the positions itself. Now, if we talk a little bit about the meeting times itself, if we can move on to the next slide, please. So if we talk about the meeting times itself, USNC TAG members do have an option to, of course, advocate for better times if the meeting has not been scheduled at a time appropriate, or it is at a very bad time for US participants where nobody can attend. Then you do have an option to appeal to the committee or subcommittee for a more favorable time and propose alternate meeting times that is fair to all group members. Also, meetings should not be held over weekends or holidays for a or national holidays for any country. Now, in some cases, this may not be completely unavoidable, but we should at least try to make sure that that is not the case. But you do have an option to ensure that if you feel like that U.S. participation is affected because of the meeting times or because of the dates that it has been scheduled on, then you can reach out and appeal to have a more favorable time. If you move on to the next slide, please. These are some of the considerations that we have to be mindful of when we are participating in virtual meetings or hybrid meetings. So consider whether the conversation will be monitored, and be mindful of the language that you use during the chats, as well as communicating to other participants. Again, follow the rules of that committee. Each committee may have different rules for participation in their meeting, and that rules will determine and guide you as to how you're supposed to behave and participate effectively in the meeting, right? So in some cases, they will have raise hand features. In some cases, where the group is small, they will say, just type it into the chat if you want to speak, or just come off the mute. So all of these will be something that you will be guided on before the meeting start, and you need to be paying attention to ensure that you can effectively participate according to those rules, and following those rules is as much important. Of course, be mindful of the fact that if speaking, you are leading the discussion, so be mindful of who within the U.S. delegation should be speaking. And of course, I don't think this really goes without saying that do not send an AI agent to the meeting. But I know that this has been a case in some meeting where an AI agent has been attending the meeting, and that is a very bad practice that looks very bad on the national body itself. Of course, in this case, of course, US will be the one that will look bad if we send an AI agent as part of the US delegation. You can certainly use AI tools to after the meeting, or in trying to help you develop meeting notes and things like that. And I know IEC has a separate guide available now for you to have a look at on how to use AI effectively during the technical committees. But sending an AI agent to a meeting is, of course, not acceptable. And then the rules will also tell you what can you do if you do indeed get disconnected from the meeting, because this is very common. Technical difficulties is something that is out of hands of everybody, and you need to be able to navigate those technical difficulties if you do come across them. So if we move on to the next slide, please. Yeah, so if IEC meeting registration system, which is the official meeting registration system that you have to register in order to attend these meetings, if that has been used for the meeting registration, and this is always the case for the plenary meeting, the MRS is always used for the plenary meeting, and if that is used, then make sure that all the delegates that are attending the meetings are indeed registered and are approved as through the meeting registration system. Do not forward any of these IEC international meeting invites to any other members unless you have specific permission and direction to do so by the chair, convener, or project leader. Of course, be mindful of the information and the words that you use in the meeting chat, and as well as the fact whether the meeting chat is even being monitored or not, because some people will type in their official positions into the meeting chat, and that's not acceptable. That is not the official way to leverage your positions, and your positions may not be even considered or taken during the meeting if you do that. So it's helpful to make sure that you are listed correctly in the meeting, and in most cases platforms like Zoom and others will allow you to change your name and modify it and list as your full name, as well as which national committee are you representing, in this case the US National Committee, and whether you are a head of delegation or you are a US delegate. And then as well as, of course, please be mindful that if video is used or not used for the meeting, especially if it's a hybrid meeting. If you move on to the next slide, and I mentioned this to you earlier, that we do have an official guidance available on from ISO and IEC both on meetings itself, and the key topics that are covered within this guidance document include the different meeting modes, virtual, hybrid, face-to-face, and the guidance for each of those modes, how to progress work in between these meetings. In most cases, your committee will meet 2 times a year, whether it's face-to-face or hybrid. But how do you actually progress the work in between those meetings? It also includes guidance on agendas, working documents, scheduling the meetings, choosing the meeting modes, how to plan out for the meeting if you are doing this hybrid and in person, handling votes and technical problems, and guidance for leaders, participants, and hosts. So if you move on to the next slide, to summarize it all, as a USNC tag as a USNC tag member, as well as a delegate to the international committee meeting, of course, ensure that you have the support of the tag itself and your organization to participate in these meetings. Be informed of the activities at the meetings and any critical outcomes coming out of those meetings. Make yourself known for any kind of tools that are being used within the meeting, whether it's tool that is being used within the tag itself to communicate among the delegates, or the IEC collaboration platform, or the IEC meeting registration system, or the IEC platform itself where the official documents are posted. So make sure that you have a know-how of how to navigate through all those the electronic tools, as well as the tools that will be necessary to do your work, such as of course, going to the meeting, having the funding available, as well as ensuring that you are familiar with the IEC and ISO policies and procedures, as well as the USNC tag operating procedures. If you move on to the next slide, please. You should also know of the IEC and the USNC structures that Wally touched on earlier. Of course, be sensitive to the nuances of the politics, negotiation, alliances, and cultural differences that takes place. And it's really the standards development is really all about navigating all those and making sure that you get your position across in a way that it carries that position appropriately, but also politically, and as well as maintaining those relationships with those national committees and the key people, as well as making sure that you are always respectful in communicating and getting your positions across, and making sure that you are in a position to advise the committee and any subsidiary bodies on any point of procedures or drafting, carefully reviewing the reports and the strategic business plans, after your meeting, and that is something that we will touch on when we talk about after the meeting. So I think this was the last slide, if I'm not mistaken. Yep. So I'm happy to take any questions for before the meeting.
I think there was just one question in the chat that's been unanswered. It is about AI. So the question is, does IEC allow the use of Gen AI tools in a few cases, example, meeting notes?
At this moment, no, they're not allowing it, but they are looking into it, and they are trying to see how they can make these tools available to the IEC technical committees as well as on the ISO side. But at this point, no, there are no Gen AI tools that are being used for even for meeting notes.
Thank you, Ali. I think that's the only question that we had that was unanswered in there. So I think we can move on to the next section.
I will hand it over to Valera. Yep. Okay, there we go.
Thank you, and thank you to the USNC for allowing me to present today. So now that you've heard from Wally and Ali on what the structure of the IEC looks like, what the different committees look like, and what are some things to prepare for before the meeting, now I'm going to talk about what are some best practices as an attendee to the meeting. So this will allow some successful participation at the meetings. So first, on the next slide, I'll start talking about particularly plenary meetings. And these are the formal business meetings that are for the technical committees, subcommittees, and systems committees where actual positioning and voting is done. As Ali had mentioned before, a head of delegation is appointed by the US TAG. Typically, that's the chair or technical advisor of the US TAG, but it is important to make sure that the US TAG has determined who that head of delegation will be if either the chair or the technical advisor is not available, because they are the ones that will be the official representative during the plenary meeting and making those votes for the US specifically. As we noted, the participation at the plenary is made up of all of the different national committees, so all the countries that are participating on the IEC standards development for that particular TC, SC, or systems committee. And so there will be head of delegations for each country, and only the head of delegations for those countries are the ones that are allowed to vote at the meeting. There may be other delegates, as Ali had noted, or experts from the national committees, but all positions will go through the head of delegation. So it's important, if you are assigned as the head of delegation, that you carefully review any meeting documents prior to the plenary meeting, if there's any resolutions or daily reports or comments from the chairs for the meetings, to make sure that you're understanding the positions that are going to be taken during the meeting so that we can reflect the US position when those votes are taken. If you are presenting a position on behalf of the US, make sure that when you're speaking concisely and quickly in order to get your point across. But remember that many delegates are not native English speakers, so make sure that you're speaking slowly and making sure that the audience is understanding your position. It's also important to consider who are your allies and adversaries at the meeting, who will be supporting your position or who will be challenging your position. So you can try to address them maybe prior to the meeting, or anticipate what their issues are to be able to respond. Also, one of the things that we've seen that is a good way to be able to coordinate the US positions when you have more than one person attending a plenary meeting is considering a separate way to communicate between the delegates. That could be a separate Teams chat, it could be a text chat, It could be passing notes across the table in the meeting, but just consider a way that you can communicate with each other if there are some challenges that need to be addressed. I do not recommend creating a chat within a Zoom for a virtual meeting because you could inadvertently send your message to everyone in the meeting, and that would not be a good thing. So in the next slide, we'll talk about working group meetings. So working group meetings, you're not representing your country at a working group meeting, you're representing your organization, but make sure that you're being affirmative and strong in presenting your positions, because you want to make sure that not only the U.S. position or the U.S. Participants are supporting your position, but the other working group members. It could be also a good idea to find allies that can help you make your case within the committee to accomplish your desired results. So who within the working group will help support your position? So I kind of said here that in the working group, it's more about your organizational position, not just your US position. At a plenary, you do want to make sure that you're not presenting your own personal opinion. At the plenary, you are presenting the national committee position. And that if you are presenting a personal opinion, that can be challenged at the TC or SC meetings. It's not, that doesn't apply to a working group, project team, or maintenance team meeting. But if you do feel that at a plenary that maybe a head of delegation of another country is presenting a personal opinion, you do have the opportunity to maybe challenge that with the chair or secretary of the IEC technical committee. So delegates can be challenged as well to produce data to justify positions. So if you are presenting a position, make sure that you have all the information ready to answer any questions. And you can consider bringing samples of products to illustrate the purpose of your position paper. So, sometimes, these are engineers, so they want to look at the product and see what you're talking about in order to help move that position forward. And one thing that can be very helpful is if you have someone traveling with you to any of these working group meetings or plenary meetings, and they're going to attend any social events with them, encourage them to get to know the travel companions of other delegates within your working group or plenary. That can help you develop relationships with those other delegates, as well as give them someone to socialize with during the week. Next slide, please. So it is important during a working group meeting or plenary meeting to understand timing issues. And this can also be very critical for a virtual meeting as well. We can see that sometimes a national committee may use delays to further their goals to move their positions forward. So make sure that you're understanding the timing within the meeting so that we're not addressing critical issues really late in the day. If you have a issue that you want to present, you don't want to wait until the end of the day when maybe there's fatigue or you're rushing through your presentation. So you can always ask the chair or secretary if you can carry that item over to the next day. It's important to also understand what are the deadlines to contribute to the agendas. There are specific deadlines for plenaries where things have to be put onto the agenda and circulated. So make sure you know what those timeframes are if you're going to be submitting any positions, or even for a working group meeting, if you feel that a new item has been added at the last minute, make sure that you object to any thing that might be late where you wouldn't have the opportunity to review it in a timely manner to be able to address any concerns that you may have. And especially in a plenary, those things should not happen. So make sure that you're addressing them expediently as necessary. And take advantage of those coffee breaks, those lunch breaks, any breaks that you have. to talk to your allies, or maybe even address issues with your adversaries, because that can help move your position forward, and can help to eliminate any impasses that may have happened during those formal discussions. So also there may be an opportunity, depending on time differences, to make a call to a U.S. delegate that may not have been able to attend, or someone who is a subject matter expert, to get guidance from them to help support any challenges that you may have received during the meeting to a position that you presented. Next slide. So it's really important to be effective at the meeting that you're acting in cooperation with representatives from other countries. As we noted, allies can be particularly useful in order to help move your positions forward. When you have more than one country's support, that can help drive results. And these relationships, as I think Wally mentioned earlier, can be professionally valuable as well, and personally rewarding. I know within my technical committee, we have a lot of great personal relationships, and it actually helps the technical committee function a lot more smoothly. So it's important to look at the attendance roster before the meeting. Who are your allies? Who are people that you want to influence? And maybe start doing that work ahead of the meeting, but know who they are when you're in the room with them. And remember that somebody who may be challenging you today may be supporting you tomorrow. So, be wary of the relationships that you're making, or be wary of the adversaries that you're making, because you could need their support tomorrow. Next slide, please. And so it's really important that anybody who's participating in an IEC working group or plenary meeting, it adheres to the IEC Code of Conduct for delegates and experts. We want to make sure that we're showing respect to the other experts from other countries. Make sure we're not just using colloquialisms, phrases that might not be understood. We want to use worldwide or agreed upon terminology, that we're listening to their suggestions and their contributions, not just being dismissive. We also want to be aware of regional or country sensitivities. Geopolitics can often take a big role within these meetings. So be aware of what's happening geopolitically, so that you can remain culturally aware and maintain a professionalism, both in person and virtually. So make sure that whatever you're putting in the chat or what you're saying in the meeting is culturally sensitive. And be careful not to make blunt statements that are very nationalistic, to US being the first or most advanced or experienced. That could offend other country participants. So we're here presenting the US position, but we also want to participate collaboratively. So we do encourage also that every participant avoid actions that could reflect adversely on yourself, the organization, ANSI, or the USNC. We don't encourage internal disagreements to be shared publicly, and we do not look for USNC delegates to argue or even imply that other countries should accept a position simply because it is the view of the US. Next slide, please. So now I'm going to talk about a few elementary things to think of when you're at a meeting. So talking versus hearing versus listening. So we all know that listening requires skill and patience, and we should be going into these meetings thinking comprehensively and critically, making sure that we understand the messages that are being delivered, and then also evaluating what those messages are. We are in meetings with people of other countries where English is not their first language. So if you don't understand, it is more than permitted to ask someone to repeat or rephrase what they have said, and you may also be asked to do the same thing. So pay attention to all communication and cues that you're hearing when something is being presented, so you can make sure that you're presenting the appropriate challenges when necessary. And when speaking, limit your own talking. Make sure that you're being concise. You're not using unnecessary words or colloquialisms or idioms that may not translate well depending on the audience. And, you know, be patient and concentrate. It can be difficult, especially when you're doing participating from a virtual or hybrid perspective. It can be difficult to focus for that length of time, but you know, make sure that you're aware of what's happening in the agenda, what the conversations are, and where we might need to provide feedback and comment. Next slide. And as I noted, you know, think about what is the essence of the message that you're hearing from other delegates, especially if you're presenting and they're presenting their position to you. That may be a challenge. Make sure you're understanding what they're presenting to you. Maybe rephrase what they've said in your own words to clarify what their intent is, or vice versa. If you're not quite sure what their position is, ask for clarification. Avoid jumping to conclusions, you know, and I talked about, you know, having the travel companions meet each other in social events, but establishing rapport with the other committee members is also important. As I said, that can actually help you align positions with other committee members within other countries and within the US as well. Try to stay in tune with each other, understand what people's positions are, why their positions are where they're coming from in their positions. And also don't assume that because a person may have heard you that they agree with you. If you're looking for agreement, make sure you're asking for agreement and confirming agreement. And then I think it's really important, especially in virtual meetings, that we're being respectful and patient and waiting for our turn to speak, whether it's using the raised hand function on a virtual call or raising your hand within the meeting. Follow the rules of that specific technical committee, how they function. Smaller committees may function a lot differently than a larger committee. So it is important to kind of know the dynamics of the committee that you're going into. Talk to people who, if this is your first meeting, maybe talk to some of the other members from the US that have maybe participated longer. If it's your first time as a head of delegation, ask for tips and tricks from other members within your tag, or, you know, even reach out to USNC and maybe they can connect you with somebody who can, from another tag, that can provide you some guidance. And also, Ali has developed an article for the spring 2021 edition of the USNC Current on global mindset for standards development. I think this is a good article for additional information on what we've talked about today that can help you become a more effective and active participant at the technical committee plenary or working group, project team, or maintenance team meetings. And I think that is my last slide. So if we have any questions, I will take them now.
Doesn't look like there are any questions in the chat. Thanks, Valara. All right, back to Wally.
Awesome. Thanks, Valara and Ali. You did a great job describing what happens, you know, before and during the meeting. And so I'll just give a brief rundown of what one should do afterwards, or what to expect at least. So the first thing is to review your meeting minutes. The meeting minutes and reports will come out shortly after. These meetings, despite their length, whether they're long or short, there will be digressions in conversation. People will challenge different topics. It's important to make sure that everything is recorded accurately and that they reflect your understanding of what was going on, especially any decisions that were made. And if there were decisions that were voted on, especially you want to focus on that and make sure that your vote or your input was recorded properly. If that was not done, you should raise that through the secretary and the chair. And if there's the appropriate action is not taken, then you can raise that to higher ranking officials, either in the USNC or the IEC as well. You also want to make sure that the leadership is accountable for what's going on in the committee, working group, or subcommittee that you're working on. If there are any concerns about conduct or performance or the very aptly titled, listening versus hearing problems that were described by Valara, you want to make sure that you know that you can come to the USNC and that you will be supported to make sure that those issues are addressed. There should also be action items following your meeting. There will, some of them will be minor, and some of them will be major, including but not limited to releasing ballots, taking votes, or even editing, a standard itself. So you want to make sure that those action items are followed through on, that there is someone who's taking responsibility for those actions, and that it's happening in a timely manner. The timeliness is really just to make sure that everyone has equal opportunity to address any changes that were agreed upon or presented during the meeting. And then you want to make sure you promote those outcomes. So whatever was voted on, whatever decision was made, you want to communicate that to the relevant stakeholders, whether internal or external to the USNC, and make sure that everyone working on this project is aware of what the next steps moving forward are. So if we go to the next slide. And then you want to report back home. As if you're designated the head of delegation, the HOD, you want to provide the report back to the USNC as soon as is possible. Do it while it's fresh in your mind. That is my recommendation, especially if you're working on multiple projects at once. It's easy and human to lose track of things, but if you do it immediately after or during the meeting, you can get those minutes and reports back to the USNC tag, and then have those disseminated to the necessary stakeholders as soon as possible and as accurately as possible. You should also summarize any challenges that happened during the meeting. Sometimes positions or opinions are accepted or challenged or ignored altogether, and you want to make sure that your tag, the people who are working on this behind the scenes and providing their input and providing their labor, time, and talents are aware of what's happening. So you should also make sure your tag administrator is doing this work. And if there is anything necessary or anything of note that should be released publicly, you can also do a submission to the USNC quarterly newsletter, the USNC Current, which I read, immediately. And then just an additional note, those completed HOD forms or head of delegation forms should be submitted to the USNC office at the email address added here. Once those documents are, once the official documents, we'll start with the unofficial. Once the unofficial documents are done, the internal edits or informational documents, those can be viewed on the IEC's collaboration platform, which requires a password to get into. And then the official documents will be numbered and published by the IEC and placed on their website, noted here. And in order to download or see those official documents, you'll need to obtain an IEC username and password from the USNC staff and be a registered expert working on that group. So those will become available, again, in a timely manner after the meeting has completed. And here is just a list of the processes, procedures, the directives, and statutes that everyone should be aware of when participating in standards through the USNC and in the IEC, whether you're participating at the tag level, at the working group or technical committee or officer level, or even the management level. You should be aware of all of these documents. They are available on the USNC and ANSI websites and can also be requested through USNC administration at any time. Any questions on how to follow up or what to expect after a meeting? Otherwise, I will look for questions in the chat. Great, thank you.
All right, thanks, Wally. So now that we know how to participate effectively in the meeting, now we have to look at how do we submit technical positions, contributions, and what are some of the guidelines for voting. So if we can move on to the next slide. So before I provide that update on technical positions and contributions, just an update for you that beginning of January 2025, beginning of this year, the online standards development tool is the default tool for all new IEC projects. And IEC has been offering already many resources for you to familiarize yourself with this platform, as well as I know many of the USNC tags itself are also organizing training sessions for their participants to learn more about how to leverage this tool, how to contribute through this tool, how to develop standards through this tool. So please take advantage of those training opportunities, as well as the new ANSI webpage with the OSD resources that is already available to you. And if you move on to the next slide, please. There is also a sandbox available for online standards development members commenting. You can try that if you are interested in trying that out yourself, or alternatively, you can attend one of the training sessions that are available through the IEC Academy, as well as the relevant USNC tags that are already making it available. So with that, let's move on to the USNC technical positions and contributions and how to submit those positions. The USNC positions shall be developed in accordance with the USNC tag model operating procedures, or if your tag has adopted a unique model operating procedures, then it should be developed with those operating procedures. Decisions should not be taken on any items that is not already posted to the agenda for the plenary meeting. US delegates, I think we have already said that US delegates should be aware of the timings and should follow the procedures to establish consensus on the agenda items within the tag itself on the US position itself. Each tag may have their own definition of quorum. So this is why it's important for you to be aware of, the tag model operating procedures, or if they're following the unique model operating procedures specifically, then they may have a different definition of a quorum. If you see any agenda item that was not already part of the agenda item that is being discussed, feel free to point that out, that was not posted to the agenda item, and go through the appropriate means to point that out, through your US head of delegation and so on. So if you move on to the next slide, the USNC technical positions should also, in terms of the proposal itself, the new proposals, it should be, of course, go through your USNC tag, as well as should be debated and discussed and agreed on before the meeting. If USNC tag is commenting on an IEC document, then they should follow the approved IEC comment template that is already available on the IEC webpage, as well as I think USNC tag toolbox. With respect to any communication on comments or votes from the USNC tags to the IEC, it needs to be sent from the official USNC office itself. And please note that, of course, with any of these documents, the copyright and the intellectual property rights should always be respected, especially when getting the copy of the standards and reviewing other copies of the standards that are not under your tag itself, because as of course the nature of the standards, you may have to review documents from the other tags from on a case-by-case basis, and there are mechanisms available for you to request the copies of those standards and dispose the copy of those standards properly once you're done reviewing that copies. So always go through the USNC office for that. If you move on to Yes, so in terms of the voting itself, the formal votes are decided by the majority of the votes cast by the P members delegation, and the P members are the participating members of the technical committee that are full members that have the right to vote, comment, participate in the meeting. There are, of course, also O members that are just observing members. But in terms of the voting, they're only looking at P members. Only one vote, as we noted earlier, per delegation, per country, that is casted by the U.S. By the head of delegation, in this case, U.S. head of delegation, and then, of course, pay attention to the negative votes, and every attempt should be made to discuss and see if a consensus can be achieved to resolve those negative comments. We move on to the next slide, please. In terms of guidelines for determining a U.S. voting positions, in general, regardless of whether or not a national standard exists, if no U.S. consensus has been established, then you must abstain. The U.S. vote, if you're voting negative, should be accompanied by, actually it's a requirement, must be accompanied by reasons and supporting information such as technical data and logical argument, as well as noting the fact that any known exceptions and or addition will require to be conformed to the U.S. safety practices or regulations, and should be noted in the comments that you're submitting. If we move on to the next slide, if, however, a U.S. national standards does exist, and it can be considered equivalent to the requirements of the international document, then you vote affirmative. If the international documents includes different or additional or more stringent requirements than what's in the national standard, and the U.S. consensus within the tag indicates that such requirements are acceptable, then you vote affirmative. If not acceptable, of course, you vote negative with reasoning. And then if the national standards includes different, additional, or more stringent requirements that are in the international document, then the U.S. consensus and the U.S. consensus within the tag itself indicates that such requirements should be modified in accordance with the international document, then you vote affirmative. It should be, if the U.S. consensus indicates that they must be maintained, that you vote negative, and if they must be maintained, but the proposed document is considered to represent the best agreement which can be attained at the present time from the international perspective, then you vote abstain with a statement that U.S. cannot modify its national standard for stated reasons. And then let's discuss the case of if no U.S. standards exist, then if the U.S. consensus within the tag establishes that the international document is technically acceptable, then you vote affirmative. If not technically acceptable, you vote negative. If the international document is of no interest to the U.S., you should vote abstain. If the international documents unnecessarily creates a barrier to domestic or international trade or impedes innovation or technical progress, then you must vote negative. And then all of these voting should be done within, if we can move on to the next slide, please. All of the voting should be done using the IEC electronic voting system and should go through the USNC office itself. And USNC office is really the one that submits the votes on behalf of the of all tags, right? So all tags should send their votes and comments to the USNC office according to the due dates. And then the USNC office, then the USNC staff is the one that will vote through the IEC electronic voting system. And if we are participating, we are a listed P member on the IEC technical committee, we are required to participate actively, required to vote, required to, in order for us to maintain our voting rights. If we don't, then we can lose our voting status and become an O member. All comments, as I noted earlier, should be submitted using the IEC comments template and should be submitted to the USNC office for submission. With that, I think I wrap up this section and happy to take any questions on this section. All right, if no questions, then I can pass it over to Valera for the last section here.
Yes, thank you. And, you know, we've talked a lot about participating and going to meetings, but what does it mean when we have the home field advantage and we're taking on hosting of committees or leadership roles? So I'll start with the first slide talking about hosting a plenary meeting in the US. When we do determine that we want to officially host a technical committee, subcommittee, or systems committee, the US National Committee is the official host, and the US is solely responsible for the effective conduct of the meeting. The US delegation may extend a conditional invitation if it's agreed to by the TAG. And the TAG administrator agrees, understanding that the USNC will then submit an official invitation to the IEC committee officers, indicating that the US is willing to host. It's important to coordinate that hosting opportunity within the fuller US TAG. I'll talk about some of what the requirements are to host and explain why. But having a meeting within the US does allow us to have a larger number of delegates participate. When we are within our own country, it's easier for US members to travel to a different state or to participate if they're actually the hosting committee. It's important, if we do determine that we want to host, that we announce it as early as possible. Especially because it is an international meeting and delegates from other countries may need to obtain visas or get permissions to travel. And, you know, scheduling meetings to our best advantage, choosing a time and location that may coincide with other events that may showcase the strengths of the US. You know, doing it in alignment with trade shows or other events and workshops that might be advantageous to the members of the IEC committee. Next slide, please. Also, what about hosting a working group meeting in the US? Working group meetings are a little more informal. The responsibility of the host, it's usually an organization that offers to host a working group meeting. The national committee is not typically the host, so it would be a trade association or an interested company that would be the one taking on the responsibility of hosting and dealing with all the logistics of determining the time and the venue in order to maximize the participation by the delegates, and specifically the US participation. Or, you know, also they may be hosting a workshop or event, an exhibit that they would like to highlight and consider other networking opportunities for hosting a working group meeting. Next slide, please. So as I noted, if we are going to offer to host a plenary meeting in the US, it is significant advanced planning that is required. So that's why it's important that the US TAG does coordinate and determine if they would like to offer to host a plenary. Planning starts usually a year in advance. You want to make sure that you're securing what the date's going to be, the location, if there's appropriate funding within the TAG, if you have sponsors within the TAG, making sure you have the financial commitment addressed and any administrative support for the meeting before offering to host. And if that is agreed to within the TAG, a written request is then sent to the USNC General Secretary, including all of the information on the dates, location, and confirmation of funding. And once it's approved, the USNC then extends that official invitation to the technical committee. And then final approval and acceptance is completed. All approvals are needed no later than 6 months in advance of the meeting. There are certain things required for the secretary and officers of the IEC committee in order to plan for those plenary meetings. So that all needs to be done with no less than 6 months in advance. And that it's, you know, all meetings should be submitted into the meeting registration system. The IEC does set up all of the meetings within that for the plenary, for virtual meetings, but the USNC does help provide some help with the meeting registration system for when we're hosting a meeting. If there's any questions about hosting a meeting in the US, you can always reach out to the USNC team at ANSI.org. Next slide, please. So now switching gears a little bit to talk about the home field advantage of having leadership roles within the IEC specifically. So there are several roles here that we're talking about. There's the secretariats of the TCs, SEs, and system committees. That is the national committee that's assigned. That would, in our case, would be the U.S. National Committee, so through ANSI. So that's when the U.S. is assigned responsibility for providing administrative services to that IEC technical committee or SC or a systems committee. There's also the chair role. So when is it advantageous for the U.S. to take on a chair role of one of these committees? They're responsible for the overall management of the committee, including any of the subcommittees and working groups within that structure. And then the secretaries of the technical committees and subcommittees and systems committees, those are the individuals that are assigned to actually do the work and provide that administrative and technical support within the committee's activities. So they're the ones that are going to be coordinating all of the documents that are circulated to the committee members. There's also the convener role, and these are the chairs of the working groups or project teams or maintenance teams. So they kind of function as the project leaders for the development of a IEC document. The project leaders are responsible for developing the standard in a timely fashion. And then we've talked about the experts. So these are the people who are the subject matter experts at the working group, project team, or maintenance team level, providing technical input into the development of the IEC document. There are also liaison representatives between maybe ISO and IEC, or within two different IEC technical committees, or within other international or national organizations that may attend meetings and participate, but they are not voting members on the technical committee. So these are all important roles and leadership roles to consider. And next slide, please. So the benefits of doing so, it does help establish USNC as a leader in the relevant sectors. It does allow us, if we're taking on a secretariat role, to nominate the chair of the committee. And being a secretariat provides the management and administration of the committee. It helps to establish the USNC in a position of influence because you're managing the work program, you're preparing the meeting agendas, you're interpreting the rules and procedures of the IEC, and you're actually able to be on the front lines of new systems that are being developed, new processes, new revenue generating ideas, to be able to kind of see what's coming from the IEC. And it does provide access to our USNC leaders and stakeholders to understand what are some concerns and issues and interests that may need to be addressed. Our secretariats are on the front line, kind of hearing what's happening at the technical committee. They're also speaking the same language as our US participants and can work, more directly with our US tag on what's coming through the process at the IEC technical committee. They're generally in a same time zone, and they're always just a phone call away to help support questions or concerns from our US delegates. Next slide, please. So I think there was a question in the chat earlier about, who just designates the secretariats or the tag administrators. So that is done through the USNC and is assigned as a tag administrator. There are costs associated with that, whether we're, as the US, supporting an international secretariat, what organization manages that does have some costs. There are direct expenses that are involved in both of these roles, from staff time, equipment, travel. You know, for the International Secretariat, there's international travel. But there are also opportunities, education and training opportunities. You know, annual international activity assessments are done, and there's ANSI membership required for the International Secretariat, but as a USNC tag administrator, your ANSI membership or there is also an ANSI membership or equivalent fee. So there are fees associated with being a member of or holding some of these roles of a secretariat or tag administrator within the USNC. And I think that might be the last slide, but yeah, those are some of the ways that we as US participants can take on leadership roles. We can host meetings. It can bring attention to you as an organization or as a US tag, you know, in taking on some of these roles or hosting some of these meetings. So I guess I will open it up for questions.
Looks like we have one question in the chat. How would I initiate U.S. participation in Workgroup 48 of TC64? The U.S. is currently not represented in Workgroup 48.
So I think you need, if there is a tag that is associated with TC64 already, you would want to become a member of that tag and ask to participate on Working Group 48. If there is not a tag already formed, I would say just reaching out to the USNC at ANSI.org to get further information on whether it's, you know, whether there is an opportunity to form a new tag. I don't know if USNC staff wants to add to that.
Yeah, just confirming that we do have a tag for TC64. So definitely reach out to us and we can put you in touch with the officers for that tag.
Okay. Yeah, so it sounds like you are a tag and you're a member. So I think it's just a matter of getting engaged and asking to become added as a Working Group 48 member. Was there another question that I saw? I think there's a question specifically about tag fees, tag membership fees. Megan, I don't know if that's a question that you can answer.
Yeah, let's see. So it says persons that are members of a tag are also incurring membership fees. So yeah, we do have a tag participation fee that all of our members pay. It's the annual, you've probably seen it on invoices if you participate, it's the annual $325 fee. And then depending on who administers your tag, there might be an additional administration fee from that organization. But yes, there are associated membership fees. And if you have any questions about that or, you know, anything additional on that, feel free to reach out to me or any of my colleagues at the USNC. All right. So George, I think I see your hand up. If you'd like, I can unmute you. I don't want to surprise you and unmute you here, but I note that you've had your hand up twice here. So I'll go ahead and unmute you briefly and see if you can ask your question to the group. All right, you should be unmuted, George.
IEC as the chair of National Committee, U.S. National Committee, sorry, the chair of the technical committee. And I just noticed that U.S. is a team member of TC64, so there should be at least several representatives.
Yeah, thank you for that.
Thank you. Bye.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Thank you, George. right. I'm not seeing any other questions in the chat. But if you do end up with any additional questions, definitely feel free to reach out to anybody at the USNC team. And I think with that, we will wrap up a little bit early. So thank you again to all of our presenters. I appreciate, again, you all sharing your knowledge and running through these and answering all of the questions that we've had today. I know it's been definitely helpful for me. I appreciate this refresher each year, and there's always new information that we learn from it. So thank you again to everybody, and thanks to all the participants who were able to hop on the webinar today. I hope it was helpful for you as well. Again, we'll share these slides and the recording to today's webinar with everybody who registered, so you should have that link in the next, I think it becomes available within 24 hours, so we should have it in your inboxes shortly after that. Yeah, with that, thank you again, and we hope to see you all soon. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks very much. Thank you.
Thank you.